Welcome, life science students, to a study on the invertebrates. We are in chapter 12D of your textbook, if you were in Mr. Jorgensen's life science class. We are studying the segmented worms and several different types of segmented worms. These are all in phylum Annelida, but the one we're going to be spending the most time discussing is the earthworm. Really our most familiar example of segmented worms, and who among us has not played with earthworms, right? As we look at these segmented worms, they are in phylum Annelida. And again, our earthworm is our most familiar example. Well, as we discuss these guys, many people will call the earthworms the digestive system of the soil. They're really more than just fish bait, and they're more than just a fun thing to play with and to make girls scream with. They're really a main contributor to enriching and improving soil for plants. As these guys go burrowing into the soil, they aerate the soil. It allows air and water and nutrients to reach deep within the soil as the earthworms eat and then leave their casts all through the ground. It's going to help fertilize vegetation. Plants are going to use that to be able to help them grow, and so they are natural fertilizers. Well, the earthworm is then our friend for farmers and helps us to be able to grow good flower beds and good gardens. Let's go ahead and look at the earthworm. As we begin to study the earthworm, we're going to take a look at his body structure. Now, they're in phylum Annelida, which means little rings. You see that over here. It means little rings. The body of the earthworm is segmented, and so we do see these different rings here. You see these different rings in the worm, made of about 100 or 150 different segments. Now, the earthworm is not quite like the planarian. You can't cut them into pieces and have a whole bunch more, but we'll see a little bit later on that it is possible to cut the earthworm and to have two new living worms, but we'll discuss that a little bit later on depending on where the cut is and so on. As we look at this little diagram of the earthworm, we see again those rings, we see the hairs. Let's go ahead and go on in our discussion. The earthworm has an epidermis. Here we go. Here's an epidermis around the earthworm. That is to serve as protection for the earthworm. He's going to be exchanging gases, both carbon dioxide and oxygen, through his epidermis. And so the little pores there are very, very essential. The epidermis is also going to be excreting a little fluid. It's going to be secreting a slimy layer, and that slimy layer is called the cuticle. And the cuticle is going to be protecting the earthworm and is going to be helping to keep the earthworm moist so that it can exchange gases, whether it be carbon dioxide or oxygen. There are two muscle layers. As we look at this cutaway of an earthworm, we see the circular muscle and the long muscle. Now, the circular muscles are just that. They squeeze inward, and as the circular muscles squeeze inward, it forces the earthworm to become thin and stretched out. It also has these long muscles that cause it to bunch up. And this is really how the earthworm is going to be doing a lot of its moving. The circular muscles squeeze, causing it to become very long and thin. Then the long muscles are going to contract. And when the long muscles contract, it bunches the earthworm up to be shorter and chubby. You see these setae, or these little hairs that protrude from the earthworm. And as these setaes then stick into the ground, it's going to help it hold its place while it's doing this contracting from skinny and long to short and fat, and the earthworm begins to wiggle. And that's how it's going to be able to move. It's going to move its way along through the series of contractions, hunkering its setae into the ground, and then contracting muscles to be able to pull itself up. So it stretches thin, sticks the setae into the ground, and then contracts and catches up. Next, we talk about the earthworm's nervous system. The earthworm's nervous system. We see the nerve cord running along here in this cutaway. If we go forward to the next slide, we see this nerve cord running along the entire base of the worm. Now, if we look at it from a cutaway, we see it right here, and it's going to be running lengthwise throughout that worm. There he is, the nerve cord. And this nerve cord is going to be responsible for receiving impulses, responding to stimuli. It's going to be sending that signal all the way through to the large ganglion. The large ganglion, of course, is acting somewhat like a brain. Ganglion is not a real brain. It's more of a response center. You also notice that it does have many different small ganglion that are going to help in case, again, the thing does get segmented or part of it gets cut off. The small ganglion can still help it be able to respond. Impulses are sent from nerve cell to nerve cell. From these nerve cells comes the contraction and the different responses of our earthworm. So as we look at our nervous systems, we have the sensory receptors transmitting a signal to a nerve cord, which send the signal to a small ganglia. We have two large ganglia at the end of the earthworm. The digestive system. The digestive system. Now the earthworm does have a mouth. He does not have a stomach like we do. Here we see the upper lip and then the mouth. The earthworm is going to be secrete a mucus that is going to help be able to bring food into its mouth, and it will really just open and close and pull this stuff in. Now, obviously, the earthworm is not eating giant chunks, but it is taking small pieces into its body, and that's really what it's doing when it burrows. It's eating its way through the soil. Mouth and pharynx. So once the food goes into the mouth, it will be pushed down to the pharynx. From the pharynx, we see it going to the esophagus, where it is carried to the crop. Now, the crop, here we have the crop. We have it passing from the mouth to the pharynx, through the esophagus, and then the crop. The crop is really going to be preparing the food for the gizzard. It's really just preparing the food for the gizzard. It's acting like a swollen digestive tract here. Once the food reaches the gizzard is really where digestion really begins to take place. As the muscles are contracting and elongating, it forces this gizzard to be pushing, and it pushes that food around. We have a mechanical digestion, and so the gizzard is pushing the food and punching the food, and what happens is, as this guy is eating, he also eats little bits of dirt and sand. And that dirt and sand is going to be grinding up against the food to help digest the actual materials that it is eating. From the gizzard, it goes to the intestine, where the digestive enzymes help to further break down the food that has been taken in, and then the food will leave through the anus. So the little mess that's left by the earthworm is officially called cas. So we'll try to use that term. If we look at our digestive system one more time, it's going to be secreting a mucus to allow the food to come in through the mouth, through the pharynx, esophagus. The crop is like a holding center for the gizzard where digestion is taking place. Through muscular contraction, it's going to be squeezing its food using the bits of sand and dirt that are inside the gizzard to help digest the food. Digestive enzymes will be put in place in the intestine, and then the cast will leave the worm through the anus. As we look at our circulatory system of the earthworm, he has a dorsal blood vessel that runs along the top, hence the term dorsal, of the earthworm's body. This dorsal blood vessel is going to be carrying blood back to the aortic arches. Some people will call these the earthworm's hearts. They are going to be pumping blood up to the front of the earthworm. So he's got these 5 different hearts or aortic arches. It is a closed system, meaning that the blood stays inside of the vessels and arteries at all time. let me just try and describe what happens. As these arches or these hearts pump the blood, they're going to be carried away from the arches. Our arteries take blood away from the arches. Arteries take blood away from the heart, and so the blood will be traveling away from the heart through the ventral blood vessel. It's going to be traveling away through the arteries. It will be going into these into different areas to be used. The blood then flows back to the heart through different capillaries and veins. Actually, the capillaries and veins are going to be collecting the blood that has been used and pulling it back up to the dorsal blood vessel, where the blood is pulled through this same pumping motion to the aortic arch. Its oxygen, its its respiratory system is completely through the skin, those pores in the skin. Wastes are collected in excretory tubules, and the earthworms do sexually reproduce. They are hermaphrodites, meaning that they have both male and female parts. What happens is two earthworms will line up next to each other. Here we go. Let's see if we can pull this up. Here we go. Two earthworms are going to line up next to each other, and as they do, a slime coat begins to pass over the earthworm. And really the reason that they need these is because this guy here, he is going to allow his sperm to come. There's a little hole that the sperm is going to be coming out of. Let's see, this is going to give us a better description of it if you want to just pause and read. But it's going to allow the sperm to leave the body through that slime coat. The slime coat then passes along the earthworm's body where it collects the eggs. So the sperm and the eggs then are mixed within the slime coat of the earthworm. And then as that earthworm keeps moving along, the slime coat, calling this the slime coat here, the slime coat is going to just kind of keep going along, and we're going to have a little cocoon, if you would, a little egg cocoon where that fertilized egg develops and becomes a young worm. Now, if they have both male and female parts, if they are producing both the sperm and the ovum, why do we need two earthworms in order to be able to reproduce? Well, what happens is they slide along each other. They're forcing that slime coat down the other worm's body. And as it forces that slime coat down the other worm's body, it is able to pick up the sperm and then pick up the egg, and that fertilization can take place, and you have this little slime cocoon that is where the fertilized eggs will develop and become young worms. So that ends our discussion on earthworms. Yes, some may reproduce asexually when cut in half. That does happen sometimes. These guys work both ways like that. So the earthworm, just kind of run through it again pretty quickly here. Pull this out so we can see this one. They are very helpful to the environment in digesting matter. They are segmented worms, meaning that they have these different little rings. We have different systems of the segmented worm. We've got the digestive system, where the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, crop is a storage area, gizzard, digestion, intestine, enzymes. The circulatory system, the blood is going to be going away through these arteries. It will then use the capillaries to push the blood to the smaller areas where it needs to go. It will be collected again in this dorsal vessel, brought back to the aortic arches, acting as 5 different hearts for the earthworm. Respiratory system is all through the skin, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide through the skin, and reproduction by helping each other out, passing that sperm to the ovum and then off of the body in that slime coat. Have a great day.